Welcome back to another episode of Design to Convert. I am excited to be back in the hot seat with an amazing guest. Today, we've got Dale Wilson, the partnerships manager from Ad Quadrant. They are a paid media and creative agency that helps e-commerce brands grow by not just making stuff and running things to help drive growth, but actually being a in-depth growth partner. I'm really excited about this conversation. The Replo team works really closely with Dale's team and with Dale. Dale, welcome to Design to Convert.
Thank you, Sanjay.
So let's jump right in by giving the audience a little bit of your background, who you are, how you got in the game, how your journey has kind of shaped over the years to get you to today.
Sure. Yeah. Dale Wilson, as you said, partnerships manager here at Ad Quadrant. I've been, if you will, in the game for, let's call it, almost 20 years. So I've worn a lot of different hats over the years, starting as a media buyer back at Yahoo a very, very, very long time ago. Since then, I've been an account manager, an account director. I've been in sales, and now here I am in partnerships. But essentially, over the years, I've just worn a lot of different hats at various platforms, including Yahoo, YP. And then I've, done some time at various, small and mid-sized agencies.
Okay, awesome. So let's actually go back to we don't have to spend too much time on it, but I'm curious to know what are the Yahoo days like? Like what media and then media buying too. What is Yahoo like YP? I'm not familiar with that. What that is?
Yeah, no, very, very interesting question. So Yahoo was. Look, when I was at Yahoo, it was a very, very different world. It was a very different industry, right? We were all learning, in some ways, how to do it in the first place, right? How to write the ad copy, how to think about the purchase journey, right? Like none of that was even kind of conceptualized, right? So we spent a lot of time nitpicking over small pieces of ad copy, figuring out the process for A/B testing on our own, all of that fun. So there was very little automation. So there was just a lot of learning and making it up as we went, which, felt a lot like the Wild West. And don't get me wrong, it was a ton of fun. But I'm way more interested in a lot of the fun contemporary things that we get to do nowadays.
What were some the key lessons that you picked up there that you kind of still use? Any major philosophical foundations?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest thing was I'm a huge fan of this idea that we don't advertise to large swaths of people any longer, right? We are advertising to individuals. We're part of an individual's experience as they're spending time on their computers, spending time on the phone, whatever that looks like. We are very much doing our best as advertisers to directly speak to them and directly engage with them. And even in the very non-automated world of Yahoo 20 years ago, it was still kind of the way that we were trying to think about it, right? I spent a lot of time in search, and so there's a lot of kind of built up inherent intent in certain search queries, and so being able to understand what that search intent was and then provide the most elegant copy possible to engage with them. That to me has very much been the foundation of essentially what I've turned into a career and kind of the world that I've gotten to play in. Right. The way that I like to think about it is, you don't have to play a top 20 hit to engage with me. I will be much more impressed when somebody's playing a song that resonates with me to make me interested in their brand or engage with me. So yeah.
And this seems like as ad technology's gotten better over the years, I know a lot of people, just depending on where you live on the privacy spectrum of things and data collection and things like that. But I'm still on team. I still lean more towards all the tools with good, safety rails.
Mm-hmm.
They're designed to make being a person using the internet, interacting with the internet, like a better experience, more customized, to your point of one-to-one experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily want to know what the top pop songs are.
Yeah.
But I when I boot up Spotify, I want stuff for me specifically.
Yes.
And so I think it's a great thing, and that's, I'm sure as you've progressed in your career, you got to see a lot of different leaps in that customization, personalization. Was there one moment over the last 20 years where you like it jumped up significantly? You were like kind of shocked by how much better things got?
This is going to sound wild probably, but I mean, I think there's a couple of big ones that stand out to me. The first one is mobile devices, right? When I first started this, mobile devices weren't smart, right? Like they were at best you were SMS texting with somebody, right? Now the wild thing is that since then, SMS has become this massive opportunity to engage with shoppers, to engage with folks that are interested in the brands that you're advertising for. So that that in and of itself is pretty amazing to watch. But even now, even in the last two and a half years, to your point around privacy, right? iOS 14 coming in, and historically we as advertisers kind of had to rely on this concept of the walled gardens, right? All the various platforms, they have their walled gardens. They were protecting their data, and sure, Apple came along and is speeding up the process by which the walled gardens are becoming a little bit more visible, and they're forcing that data outside of the walled gardens, which I think is it's an amazing opportunity for brands, right? You get to own the data about your customers, about not just kind of what they're buying directly from you, but who they are, and you get to understand that data a lot more thoroughly and to me in a much more interesting way to provide them with a unique experience that's particular and specific for them.
Do you have a dog in the fight when it comes to classifying that data as first party or zero party data? Before my working career, I was a literature major. So in that way, words are really, really important to me. And so I'm all about specificity. So I want to know if it's zero party. I want to know if it's first party. I want to know where the data came from, because that's also going to tell me the value in that data, right? It's also going to tell me what the potential is around that data. So I want as many specific nomenclature pieces as possible. So yeah. Yeah, I'm still really confused on it. It doesn't seem like there's like an accepted understanding of what it is. But every time someone talks about what zero party data is, I'm like, well, it just seems like it's first party data. I don't really know what the delineation is.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I've essentially been differentiating it, and I've kind of taken it as the standard in our industry, is zero party is you go to the site and you actually actively fill out the data, right? You put in your email address, you put in your name, etc. Whereas first party data is you're still collecting that information. You've acknowledged to them that you're collecting some kind of information about them by the sheer fact that they're on the site. You're pixeling them. You're getting kind of less directly engaged data, etc.
So the delineation there would essentially be like zero party data is a form fill, like an email, SMS submission, or a quiz, like they fill out information on the quiz.
Yes.
Whereas in your eyes, the first party would essentially be like person X came from this geography and they clicked on these pages. Those sorts of like
largely pixel driven. Yeah, largely pixel driven, things like that. Yep.
All right, cool. What was like some of the parts of like being a lit major that like you've been able to bring over into the marketing world? I mean, there's some possibly straightforward things one could think of, like, okay, if you have a pretty good control of language and that helps you write marketing copy better and kind of understanding how people think in that way. But what are some of the other ways that like, or some interesting ways that the lit background that you have like came into your marketing life?
Storytelling.
Yeah.
It's absolutely storytelling, man. To your point around language, right? And the specificity of language. But for me, it's all about storytelling. It literally is everything that I've done. Just last week, I was ruminating about the idea of how important storytelling has been to my career, and the ability to, even as a creative, right? So when I was writing ad copy, I had to be able to be creative about the ad copy that I was writing, but I also had to be able to tell stories to both my the people that I reported to in Yahoo, right? I had to tell them why I was writing the ad copy that I was writing, but I also had to be able to explain that to the clients, to the account managers. This is why, right? So storytelling is massive. To me, in some ways, there's been no more valuable tool than my ability to tell a story.
How do you merge? So let me back up. One of the things that I've always struggled with when writing copy, and honestly, just like framing experiences for customers. So like copy is one thing, but like framing experience for a customer is the desire to push the story and the narrative while still having the direct response, like the sales focus. Like, how do you reconcile those two things?
It's the absolutely beautiful merging of the art and science of it all, right? It really is. It is a talent that we have to develop as as an industry that very much comes out of kind of the creative background, right? I always think of like the images of like Mad Men, right? The show, right? And they're presenting this big board of beautiful images that they plan on having as being the commercial that they're going to write. All of that fun, but at the same time, though, we're in a data driven time, right? And so what might have been the beautiful image that sold Snickers or Chevy or whatever 50 years ago isn't going to be the same consideration, isn't going to be the same experience for the shoppers that are going to sell the same products today, to everything we just talked about, right? The individualization of experience, the individualization, the ability to have an individualization of experience is massive, right? The fact that we can know something about Sanjay that's going to say, you know what, it's a lifestyle image that's going to get him to buy this Chevy car, right? As opposed to, for me, it might be less of a lifestyle image and more of a utilitarian consideration, right? Yep. That's incredible, right? And being able to please people individually, but with products for the masses is amazing.
One of my first mentors in like sales, he built his fortune in direct mail. And he would one of the things that he told us that he was really, really good at, so he'd partnered up with like Toyota, and they would get all this information about like the customer segments, so they know if they sent the just to use some of the modern Toyota examples, if they sent the male 22 to 35, the brochure, but you knew that they were single, they'd send them the Supra, the postcard with the Supra on it. Yeah. If you send it to like the family, right? Either the mom, dad, whatever, like the minivan, the Sienna is on there, and so on, and like being able to segment that. And it's a little thing. Like, it's so subtle. Like, it could be the same offer, like come test drive, you get this bonus, whatever. But like just changing, the personalization and that little piece, I mean, makes a huge difference. And I really just you're right. It is an art. It is a science. It is a muscle that I think we all need to train. Yeah. One of the things that I know that Ad Quadrant is very particular about is your love and your effectiveness when working with challenger brands. Can you walk us through what a challenger brand actually is, like what defines it and why you all love working with them so much?
Yeah, challenger brands to us, in some ways, it's just what we find as being some of the most interesting brands in the market. But that, I think goes back to kind of who Ad Quadrant is, right? We encourage folks to be entrepreneurial internally. We encourage folks to really embrace the concept that the brands that we work with are to some degree, they're important to us, right? They're brands that we want to have a stake in to some degree or another, and we want to show success, right? So in that way, we very much value this. But the concept essentially is this: these are brands that have high aspirations. They've got big goals, but they don't. The funding that they currently have does not necessarily reflect the potential to hit those goals, right? They may not have the money in the bank to accomplish it, but we know through our own experience, and they know through the experiences that they've had, that if they hit a certain kind of set of milestones over a period of time, and they do it effectively, efficiently, et cetera, they're going to be able to accomplish those really big, lofty goals that they're trying to hit, right? It could be doubling revenue for the company over a X period of time, whatever the case may be. But knowing that those goals are lofty, and knowing that those goals are quote unquote potentially impossible, but still having the aspirations to do it, and looking for a plan, right? Looking for thought leadership to be able to accomplish that. Those are the brands we have a lot of fun working with, right? So often some of those brands will have, maybe they've had a single product success, right? And it's gotten them to, let's call it anywhere from 10 to 30, $50 million in annual revenue. And now they're just looking to expand beyond that, right? Expand beyond that initial product that showed them success. They're looking for additional thought leadership. They're looking for more growth potential and leadership than what's gotten them to where they're at right now.
I would imagine that one of the key levers that challenger brands get to pull in order to get to so where they're at, maybe the cash doesn't reflect not only aspiration, but where they act, the actual enterprise value of the business, right? Mm-hmm. Relative, or the value of the brand to where they want to be. I would imagine that one of the biggest levers that they can pull is storytelling, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Can you walk us through some of the processes that y'all have on not just storytelling, but also some of the other technical things that you do to help get the challenger brands from where they're at to where they want to be?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the kind of easy ones that I often talk about is, look, TikTok is flashy, it's exciting, it's a lot of fun, but for every brand, depending on where they're at in their business life cycle, maybe it's not what you need right now, right? Maybe it's not the platform that's going to get you to that next level, at least in the short term, right? Maybe there's something else that could be a lot more effective for them, and allow for some additional stability, right? I mean, the easy example is making sure that you've got your Google fine-tuned as much as possible, right? So that when somebody searches for your brand, not only are you showing up, but you're showing up in the most effective way, right? Other examples might be, something that's maybe less prominent, like say a Pinterest, right? If you're one of the key verticals that does well in Pinterest, why not own it? There's a lot of massive opportunity there, and you're not going to need the creative, flywheel that is ultimately necessary to be successful on on TikTok. So make sure you're accomplishing your goals on some of the, if you will, a little bit easier platforms, and then you move into the more advanced, or the ones that in the case of TikTok, really need a lot more creative and just different considerations.
It seems like it's pretty hard for a lot of brands to get creative that works on TikTok. Mm-hmm. So when you're approaching that problem, what kind of coaching do you give the brands? I'd imagine there's quite a few conversations you have to say hey, either it's what you described, it's let's go prioritize these other channels where you can capture these low-hanging fruits, yeah. Or until you have the bandwidth and the resources, et cetera, to be able to pull this off. Or if that's the channel that they need, TikTok and Reels and Shorts is like the vehicles for growth that they need. Like, how do you coach someone through that? How do you coach an operator through that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for me, the first thing is really creative, ensuring that they're going to be able to provide the amount of creative that's necessary. And I should mention too that it's not strictly about every creative piece being flashy and new. There's ways to iterate off of a winning creative to ensure that it still engages effectively with a segment of an audience. But being conscious of that, and also just being just aware of the trends, right? I mean, there are going to be trends that are going to get you noticed. Don't be afraid of those trends. And I would say that probably the most important thing, this has been an important aspect of online marketing for as long as I've been in this world, and that is, don't assume that you are 100% certain of what creative is going to be the most effective for your audience, because in some ways, until you've really thoroughly explored all audiences, you may not really know who's going to be the most effective audience for you. Other things to be conscious of, and this goes hand in hand with what I was just talking about, is thinking about what's the most important aspect of the audience that you're engaging with. And what I mean by that is it lifetime value that you ultimately want to maximize, or are you just looking at least in the short term, around AOV, right? Are you maximizing that first purchase with the idea that you're going to retain these customers in some other strategy? You have to be really conscious of, like, what are you trying to accomplish with those individual platforms, and the amount of creative and effort that's going to be necessary to execute against that.
When someone new comes to you, like what's like the checklist that y'all run? Like, you audit their current website, their offers, et cetera. Like, what are all the different things that you're focusing on when someone first comes in to get to that point where you're able to have those conversations?
Sure. Yeah. Ideally, we get to dig in as much as the prospect will let us. But we want to look at your stack. We want to understand how your site was built. Is it capable of doing A/B testing? Do you have all of the reviews platforms? Do you have the data aggregators that are going to ultimately be necessary, right? Thinking about the Triple Whales and North Beams and Measured's of the world, right? Are you even collecting all of that data into a single place where you can read it, right? Starting with that, looking at that, reviews, return policies, all of those things that, maybe don't seem like they are necessarily impacted by paid media, but they are, right? They ultimately are, because if I'm driving the wrong audience, your returns are going to go through the roof. And if your returns go through the roof, then you're in a negative position, right? Or even looking at fulfillment is another really good example, right? If you are incapable of fulfilling all of the orders necessary that we're going to drive, then we're in a sticky situation, right? So to that point, we like to be able to see as much of it as possible. We really like to get under the hood of the car and take out the engine block and dig around a little bit and say, okay, how's your suspension look, right? Like, everything involving the car do you have the amount of air necessary that is indicated in the book to tell you that your car is going to operate effectively, right? Everything as much as possible. That's the ideal situation, because it really allows for us to understand if we're going to drive the right traffic, or we're going to drive a converting traffic. Is it the right traffic, right? Is it the right converting traffic? So there's so much potential in terms of what we can audit. The ideal situation is that we get to audit everything.
Having been in client services myself and run an agency, one of the things that I always struggled with was dealing with clients that were so far removed from how maybe ad platforms worked, or thinking about LTV versus CAC, or thinking about LTV period, thinking about
Yeah.
retention, like all of these different things where the person running the brand does not have the even like the foundational knowledge on how like e-com growth specifically works.
Yep.
How do you navigate that? Like, I mean, I'm sure that comes up more than you'd like, maybe, but like, what kind of education do you have to provide to kind of bridge the gap?
I would say that's one of the wonderful things about working with, as we've talked about in the past, what we call challenger brands, right? Because a real true challenger brand, when they're looking for thought leadership, right? They're looking for someone who is going to know more than they do, and be willing to learn, right? And in some ways, that's one of the things we'd like to vet for in every conversation, is to figure out, who's going to learn from us and who's going to be open to new ideas, and be able to trust and have faith in our proven success, our proven history of being able to do it already for other brands. So, just being able to do it for them as well, and I guess in some ways give their willingness to give up the reins, and let somebody else drive the cart for a little while.
Just letting the experts do their job, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Putting the trust in them. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I never really thought about, I guess, like a true, like the true challenger brand is, a group of people or a person that wants someone, like wants to hire the best people, and that's actually like a really great distinction. And that goes back to your point of like, in the same way that an e-commerce brand would want to find the best customers, like the people that are going to keep buying and support and rave and not issue a bunch of chargebacks and all these sorts of things. Like, you as a business want the same thing. I think it's a pretty universal business lesson. You had mentioned, using tools and pulling, data from tools like Triple Whale, Northbeam, et cetera. Walk us through how you're using those tools now, and then like, maybe some specific insights that you want to see out of those platforms.
Yeah, I mean, the easy ones, I say easy, but to your point earlier, it's not always an easy number to figure out, but lifetime value is wonderful. AOV, positive trends over periods of time, right? Those are a little bit obvious, but in some ways, the simplest metrics are kind of the best, but being able to track them appropriately under a single consideration, under a single benchmark. For instance, MER, right? Looking at marketing efficiency ratio and really understanding, when I'm spending X, regardless of how I'm spending it, where I'm spending it, but it's having a negative impact, am I getting the positive impact that's going to make it worth it, right? Being able to say, regardless of the quote unquote positive ROI on Google versus the positive ROI on any Meta product or TikTok, regardless of all the positivity you might see in the platform, when you back that out to your business and you have a really good understanding of the individual attribution of each of those platforms, that's to me the most interesting thing about what these data platforms are doing.
Can you walk us through the difference between like MER and like ROAS, or just like a true ROI? Because I know it's talked about a lot, and sometimes I feel like the people who are talking about it may not actually have like a fundamental understanding either. It's just like the way to talk about it. Yeah. So could you just like give us like your breakdown of what that actually means?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because this actually goes back to kind of how I think about literature and language and everything that comes along with it, right? ROI's had 1,000 meanings over the last just 10 years, right?
Yep.
But the basics is return on investment. But from our perspective, or certainly from my direct perspective, ROI, quote unquote, is really just the positive number, or the number that you're seeing in the platform that in many ways kind of tells you whether or not you're educating the platform, whether or not you're having a positive impact, giving the algorithm everything that it needs in order to be successful, to find shoppers, to find the converting shoppers for you, et cetera. So often I don't really kind of live in the ROI world outside of just kind of platform consideration, right? Am I hitting a positive return on an investment? Am I driving the right signal? Am I teaching the algorithm the right kind of way? So we always back that out to off-platform numbers, right, as much as possible, to really truly understand from an attribution perspective, is the business net profitable, right? Because that's ultimately one of the most important goals that we can talk about. But again, it's really about finding a metric outside of the platform numbers, outside of any of those walled gardens that I talked about earlier, that really helps us understand, is the business hitting those milestones that I talked about earlier? Are they hitting those milestones? And those milestones should be built alongside your MER goals, right? Going back to what I was saying earlier, what is your 2024 goal, and what are you doing in 2023 to hit that goal? And part of that should be a consideration of MER and understanding, am I hitting the level of revenue I'd like to hit?
The profitability note that you made is so important. I really want to take a moment to call that out. I know historically there have been brands that I've talked to that have partnered with folks that grew them a ton revenue wise, but they took a really big L on the profitability side. They took a wash. And I think each agency or operator within the growth function of different brands, they all have a different approach to how to actually handle profitability while driving growth.
Sure.
Can you walk us through some of the processes that y'all have at Ad Quadrant, and maybe some of the internal things that you look for to make sure that, one, you have all the baseline information to understand how to measure profitability, and then two, how to actually maintain profitability while you scale?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we like to look at a few different things. We like to look at, again, thinking about lifetime value, right? What is the holistic value of that customer? How are they being retained? Are we retaining the right audience to ensure long-term profitability, right? So for instance, this is an amazing quote from our head of media, and he talks often about, you might have two different converting audiences, and if one audience is converting, or let's say both audiences are converting at a $60 CPA. If your product is $100 value, that's not a terrible CPA, right? But if one of those audiences is a $6,000 lifetime value, and the other audience is really just that $100 of the initial purchase, they're not of equal value, right? And so being able to break that down, figure out who that is, figure out how you're speaking to that audience, and then how do you differently speak to additional audiences or additional segments of audiences that are still going to allow your business to grow. That to me is the magic, right? That's when you're really hitting and humming and doing it all right. And
what typically, with your clients, how much of their books do they open up to y'all? Do you get to see all the way under the hood, plugging in directly with their finance teams, or is it a step above that? What's the typical?
Ideally, yeah. Ideally, we get as much access as possible, because we want to be able to provide them. We want to understand what those, like I said, those long-term goals are, right? If the goal is to hit a certain metric of efficiency, the more that we know that, or let's say it's to hit a certain level of revenue, the more that we know that, the more effective we're going to be in ensuring that we're hitting all of the little bumps along the road appropriately in order to accomplish that. So absolutely, the most information that we can have, the more effective we're going to be.
And how do the different parts of your business, different departments, et cetera, how do you all play together to build these plans?
Yeah, we've got an incredible media team that does just absolutely amazing work. I had the privilege of working with several of those folks for a couple of years. Really, really brilliant work going on there. We've got an incredible head of media that really drives the media strategy. And then we've got a strategic account management team that includes account directors, various levels of folks that they own the relationships, right? Own those conversations, own the ability to talk about what's going on with the media team. Often they're aware enough to be dangerous, right? So being able to have those conversations with the clients and explain why we're doing X and why we're doing Y, why were you targeting a specific audience versus another one, why we need additional creative, or why we can iterate off of an existing creative that's not going to add to the cost of generating new creative, right? That's largely what our kind of customer engagement team looks like. We've also got some overlap with data. We've got an incredible creative team that really understands performance-driven creative in this way that astounds me every single day. So just being able to have those folks get on a call and tell the stories, right, that we talked about earlier, in terms of tell the stories around why creative A is the most successful and why we need to iterate off of that creative is a massive component. So largely it's essentially 4 different teams, starting with strategy, really being able to have those conversations, media execution, being able to buy on the various platforms as necessary, and creative, just being able to say, you know what, this is the creative that's going to be the winner for us. Let's continue to iterate off of it, et cetera. And then data, really understanding if you're collecting that zero-party data or first-party data, what are you doing with that data? Mm-hmm. Right? Being able to strategically have a conversation about data execution. Once you've captured data, are you using it on TikTok? Are you using it on Facebook? What are you doing with that data is another massive conversation for us.
On the zero party side, are you recommending to your clients to use like post-purchase surveys, fairing, no commerce, those sorts of things?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because again, it's really about, I'm an old school customer service guy. So technically this is a second career for me. My first career was really in customer service and teaching a lot of folks how to speak to their customers. So again, it just comes back to, where I've landed here, but being able to understand why they made a certain purchase or why they didn't make a different purchase is a massive conversation, because then you can come back to them and say, hey, you know what, we know that you really enjoyed this product. We think that this other product would be very complementary to that. Why not consider it, right? You didn't like that product. Was it a sizing issue? Then we can have a different conversation with them, and maybe there's a returns conversation to be had, or maybe they just buy the additional product, whatever that needs to look like. Absolutely. Post-purchase surveys are key.
Do you trust, or I guess I'll switch it and say, do you ask in your post-purchase surveys where someone first heard of that brand?
Yeah, ideally you get that little extra piece of attribution, right? Because you also want to know, because even if it's not really where the first engagement was, that's their first conscious engagement.
It's the highest recall.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. That's I've never really thought about it that way. That's actually a really, really good way to think about it, because I was definitely leaning more towards I'd rather have North Beam tell me where what the journey looked like versus trusting that they remembered exactly that it was the Facebook ad and not the TV commercial that they saw, or the wheat paper on the subway or whatever, just the random stuff like that. But that's actually a really good, you can at the very least attribute the effectiveness of your creative from a recall perspective.
Yeah, you get to see, but you also, I think it's a way to learn where the purchasing audience becomes, I hate to say self-aware, but product aware, right? Look, we've all seen 1,000 commercials for Coca-Cola on TV, right? It's just it's ubiquitous, right? But when you have a very specific experience that turns that light bulb on for you, or gets you to think about Coca-Cola in a different way, in some ways, that's the real magic, right? But being ubiquitous in the first place is also just as important, right? So you want to learn that on the back end data in your Northbeam, in your Triple Whale, whatever that looks like. You want to learn that, but you also want to know, was it the Facebook ad that really drove them, right? That made them aware of what they were going to do or how they were going to engage with your brand. Yeah.
Do you ever experience any pushback from your clients when you say, hey, we should use like a Triple Whale or a Northbeam as an additional layer of attribution? Because I would imagine really. Post-purchase is pretty easy to sell, right? Because it's relatively cheap, but then you start getting into your attribution.
I think those are relatively easy to talk about. Attribution has been such a holy grail for so long, right? Being able to get any kind of detail around why spend the money in a particular way, I don't see any reason to say no to it. To me, it's worth every cent.
Let's actually, we have to dive into like a case study or like your favorite story here, because I know that you have scaled some brands into the big leagues, some wild numbers. Tell us your favorite story of like growing a business. What all did you do? What was the growth like?
Yeah.
Break it down for us.
I'll give a relatively, it's one of my favorites just because it's a little bit close to my heart. So there's a brand, Rockform. They do some amazing products, cell phone cases, digital product, or I should say electronic products, speakers for your golf cart, things like that. Is fun stuff. And we'd had a Google engagement with them, I think for a year and a half, showed some success, but it was when we brought on Facebook that I think it really, really stood out, because we could really deeply engage with their shoppers at multiple levels. And just looking at some numbers here, we saw 104% increase in revenue year over year via paid search, which who doesn't want to double their revenue? And then we saw a 72% increase in ROAS, off of some of those top campaigns. So just some really solid success there. It's also cool that it's a local Orange County, Southern California brand that I just happen to know pretty well. So yeah,
that's pretty slick. I actually just pulled them up on my screen, and I realized that a buddy of mine that's like a hardcore golfer, he's got their golf speaker, which is pretty cool. And he's like obsessed with that thing. I know he doesn't go anywhere without. He plays golf all the time, and his wife got it for him for Christmas. And
hopefully, we were the ones that showed him the advantages of a rock.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so I mean that's pretty tremendous stuff. Like it's a significant 50% lift in revenue, like 104% increase in revenue year over year via paid search specifically. Like that's really, really intense. Walk us through what the client felt when you did that. Like, I mean, I'm sure there was like a layer of gratitude, but or is it like, holy cow, this is amazing, or holy cow, how do we keep up with this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in that case, it was awesome too, because we'd already had a relationship with them, right? Mm-hmm. They had already seen what we could do with Google. And we did that really, really well. So when we were able to very quickly move in and own the Facebook engagement, I mean, again, who wouldn't want to see 104% increase, right? So just being able to hit those numbers for them, I think, look, it felt great. They are definitely living in that challenger brand world of setting out for lofty goals. So we're perfectly fine with those awesome. And look, it's encouraging to the team, right? Being able to see the success, know the success, and then have the client come back and say, you know what, you accomplished it. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Dale, we're coming up close on time, but there are a few more questions I want to ask, and I want to ask this first one, which is, you've been in the game in this kind of like the agency-ish role, right? You've helped a lot of brands grow. I'm sure you've transformed hundreds, if not thousands, of lives through the growth that you've given to other businesses. And obviously, you've grown your own businesses during that period of time. At any point in time, did you say, you know what, I want to launch my own physical products brand? I want to run my own e-com company? And have you?
I have actually.
There you go.
I actually ran or run to some degree still a couple of different organizations. I launched a e-commerce printed books brand, online books brand with my wife. She now runs it kind of separately as a different entity. But yeah, I had to test it out for myself, right? I had to catch the bug. I had to feel it and do it. I also ran a reviews site for a couple of years where I was reviewing individual products, getting it onto the site, talking about it, engaging with them. So yeah, man, I caught the bug for a little while, but I stepped away from it for a couple of different reasons. First of all, I just wanted to get kind of, if you will, a little bit more deeply engaged with, the agency life that I was experiencing at the time. And, I'll admit there was a little bit of burnout, but, it was fun doing it.
Burnout from running the e-com projects.
Yeah, from doing both, right?
From doing both,
doing my own thing individually at home at night, when I had the free time, and then doing it in the day. So yeah, but dude, it was so much fun when I was doing it.
What were some of like the biggest lessons of being the operator? Like what did you pull that you brought back into the agency life?
It's a really good question. The other aspects of running a business, right? I now know what it's like to pay other people's bills in that way, right? When they're working for me, being able to have that conversation and being able to understand the value and need of a marketing team to be the en masse sellers of products, man, that really hit home. Yeah.
Again, just kind of going back to the fact that you've been in the game for as long as you have, what keeps you in the game? Like, why do you wake up and say, you know what, I'm gonna grow some businesses today? Like, what's the energy that
for me, it's two things. Everything that you just said, right? The fact that I can say I'm going to go engage with a brand. I'm going to go engage with in a company that I've, over 4.5 years of being at Ad Quadrant. I still love working here, right? And a deep appreciation for that. But I would even say, just being able to like walk out into the world and have that positive impact is just, it's incredible. The second thing is just the constant evolution of this industry. There's always something new to learn. There's always some new product. There's always some new way of looking at everything that we're doing, right? We for the longest time never thought we were going to ever solve the attribution problem. And I'm not saying that we have solved it, but we've come so far in being able to understand the value of individual platforms and their impact on products and things like that. Yeah, man, it's so much growth opportunity here, and the fact that I get to have a positive impact on businesses it's a lot of fun.
Amazing. Last two questions. First one's going to be a personal one. Second one's going to be a business related one. Actually, I'm going to flip the order. I'm going to ask the business one and then I ask the personal one. The business question is, over the coming months, maybe the remainder of the year, what's like the number one thing that people can expect out of Ad Quadrant, out of you professionally, your whole crew? Like, what's like the big project that y'all are pushing on?
Yeah, partnerships has become massive for us. And really it's allowing for us to do a couple of different things. I think it's allowing for us to more systematically find more challenger brands that we can more deeply engage with. But it's also allowing for us to become, I think, more effective with the challenger brands that we work with, right? Being able to find other partners that are like-minded and being able to differently engage with them in new and interesting ways for the brands is just, it's exciting, right? Because look, Ad Quadrant can't do everything, but that's okay because we've got a partner that can do it, right? And that's super cool. So being able to answer the question, do you do this with maybe not a yes, but we don't, but we know someone who does, is just an awesome way to do what I do.
That's awesome. And the last question that I have for you today before we part ways is, if you could go back in time and tell yourself right at the start of your career one piece of advice based on everything that you've learned over your career, what's that one piece of advice you're giving to yourself at the beginning?
Hold on to that confidence.
Yeah.
Hold on to that confidence. I always had the skills. I always had the knowledge, the thirst for knowledge, the ability to do it. I just didn't always have the confidence to do it. I would encourage confidence in myself. Yeah.
And what were some of the things that like broke down the confidence? Because that's actually that's a great piece of advice. I think I would give myself that today, based on like start of day, end of day. I would give that myself that advice. But
100%.
Like, what are some of the things that like wore it down, and then how did you find it again?
You know, it's funny. For me, and a lot of folks I think would argue differently. The grind. I think a lot of people get worn and torn by the grind of the day-to-day activities of waking up and doing everything you need to do from a personal perspective, and then getting in the car and having to drive, however long or far you need to drive, right? The grind never bothered me. What often would get at me would be just kind of those individual situations where temporary moments of failure, right? And not realizing that failure was really a lesson and not a reason to get down on myself. Those are the moments that kicked my butt. So yeah.
Okay, well, hold that confidence and just keep pushing through. I love it. Dale, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today on Design to Convert. I hope that we get to have you again. We as a company, and I personally, am very grateful to get the opportunity to work with you and to work with Ad Quadrant. You are amazing partners. Highly recommend you check them out. Link to their URL will be in the show notes. Dale, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Sanjay. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.